Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Book Tribe podcast. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by not one, but two incredible guests today. I have with me Emily Golden and Rachel May, the coaches and editors behind Golden May Editing, and they help fiction writers make writing craft and process work for their unique brains, dreams, and lives. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm thrilled. This is the first time that I've had two people on the podcast, so we're going to have to see if we can navigate through this, because I'm sure we've all got a lot to say. And thank you for actually having me on your podcast, and we'll get to, talk about your podcast, and we'll share podcast links in the podcast description. But on your podcast, we actually talked about marketing for authors.
We did. Yeah, it was fantastic.
We heard a lot of good things from our writers in our community of like, oh, this is so helpful. Marketing is so hard. So it was incredible having you on.
Oh, I'm so glad, because it is it's a difficult topic to navigate. It's a scary topic for us to navigate, and we've already had some great speakers talking about marketing for authors on our podcast here at the Book Tribe. But yes, anything that can help authors to navigate that really difficult landscape is absolutely the priority. So we're going to get started, but we have to begin with a bookish question, okay? So for each of you, I'm going to be asking if you could recommend a book for our listeners. What would that be? And Rachel, let's start with you.
Yes. Okay. Can I do two? Sorry. I just recently read a fiction novel. It was called Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. And it was amazing. It was incredible. It's a historical fiction book set in 1850s Mexico with vampires. And it was very, very, very good. I had read it for one of our classes and enjoyed it immensely. And at the same time, I had read The Pairing by Casey McQuiston, which was another like really incredible book, incredible descriptions, just really vivid, like prose, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about either of them. So I gave you two.
I mean, it is cheating a little bit, but I'll give you that, because I think it's really nice when you have those books that just like they just transport you. They just, and you don't forget about them. There are books on my shelf that I'm just like, I know like I can remember every piece of it because it hits something inside of me. Yeah. And Emily, what's your recommendation for our audience?
Yeah, so I just finished The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, and it was incredible. It's a mystery about a wealthy girl who goes missing at a summer camp, and her brother went missing 10 years ago. And so it's just this like, and her parents own the summer camp. It was fascinating. It was so good. It was like a masterclass in character development because it had like 15 point of views, and every single one of them had like deep backstory, and like they were all very, very three-dimensional. It was so good. Would highly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, there are some amazing, like, to have 15 points of view is an incredible.
I mean, that might be an exaggeration. I don't know. There were a lot, maybe like 8. I might have doubled it, but there were a lot.
Yeah, but I think you're right in that, when authors are reading other people's work, there's something to be learned from reading. Like, I can't imagine an author not reading and kind of broadening their horizons.
Yeah, I mean, it was just fascinating, especially since we just taught a class on how to write character backstory and like how to explore that. And I was like, wow, the work she must have done to make all of these people so real and so different from each other. Like it was amazing.
And I guess there's also a lesson in that, the author didn't just kind of write it and it was done. Like there was work involved in that process. Like it's not like an overnight job. Like there's a journey from having the idea and kind of building, world building, character building. It's a lot of hard work. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much, guys, for those recommendations. A nice little mix of kind of paranormal and mystery there. But let's talk about you guys for a second. for each of you, it'd be great to kind of learn a little bit more about you individually, because yes, I have you both here and we're talking about what you both do together, but what do you do individually, and then kind of how you ended up connecting. So Emily, do you want to get started?
Sure, yeah. So before I entered the book world, I worked in environmental justice. So I did that for a while until a lot of the work that I was working on kind of hit some walls, and then I ended up in some organizations that weren't healthy for me. And I had met Rachel at that point. We can tell you more about that later. But I had decided to start writing a fantasy novel just to sort of give myself an outlet, and I fell in love with it. I met Rachel. We became critique partners, and just never looked back from there. I
Yeah.
started writing a lot, started editing, started coaching, and then I also didn't stop writing. So my debut, Behind the Crimson Curtain, my pen name is E.B. Golden, came out in September, and I just turned in the first draft of the sequel a couple weeks ago. And so yeah, so that's me.
Amazing. And just quickly, what is it that you think kind of drew you to writing fantasy particularly?
I have always loved fantasy ever since I, started reading it as a kid, and so it's always been my preferred genre to read. I think just because of the escapism piece,
Mm.
and so when I started writing, it was out of a need for escapism, so it was a really natural sort of place to go. But I also find that I process a lot of what's happening in the real world by putting it into my fantasy novels. So my books tend to be somewhat political. Like there's a lot of things about, how people treat each other and like the decisions that people make around like how they think the world should work. And a lot of that is me like processing what is really happening in a way that's detached. So that's
Yeah.
kind of
And
why I turned toward it, because
yeah,
it's not real, but it's still, it's still real.
Real.
yeah. And I think we find that a lot of like new authors coming into, starting writing and it's their first book, it tends to be a genre that they enjoyed reading, and that's, they're looking to kind of replicate something in their writing from something that they've probably seen or felt, or just wanted to expand on that feeling, I guess. And Rachel, what was your journey into writing?
Yeah. Well, this is such a good segue because I started reading when I was in about middle grade. And my brother, he's a little bit older than me, and he was a voracious reader from a very young age. And my parents kept trying to get me into reading, and it just didn't take. And I like couldn't find, like, it wasn't the same. It didn't feel good. And I like distinctly remember trying to read like a Nancy Drew novel and just being like, it's fine. Like not loving it the way that my brother seemed to love reading. And then I got my hands on a middle grade fantasy, and like it changed everything about my life from like that day forward. I still have, like, I can't get rid of the book. I still have it. I'm like, that's the book that changed everything. So I got into fantasy in middle grade. And by the time I was in high school, I was like, I want to make people feel the way I feel when I read these books. So
Mhm.
I started writing and like really had never stopped. I went to college. I did English literature. I wanted to be an editor. I was writing all through college. And then out of college, I got into the startup world. And I worked for a startup company and was really firmly in like career space. I still wanted to be a writer. I still wanted to be an editor, but it's hard to break into the industry. And I was already like doing really well in the startup world. Then I was looking for a critique partner, found Emily, and it just like took off. It was like we completely changed the way that we looked at writing and story. And like the writing journey was not easy. Like it was really challenging. And even though I went to school for English literature, it like did not teach me how to write a book.
Mm.
So I really struggled, and it was hard, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I like I'm a perfectionist, so I struggled with all those things. But meeting Emily was really the catalyst of like, let's completely transform our writing lives. And then once we did that, we were like, we can help other people do this too. And we looked into becoming book coaches, and that's how we started.
And just kind of between the two of you as individuals, as authors, did you find that you were facing the same challenges, or were you facing unique challenges? Like, is that part of why you then ended up kind of building this kind of business together, do you think?
Yeah, I think we were facing it's a really good question. And Emily, I'm so interested to hear your answer. But I do think I think we were facing similar big picture challenges, like how do you make character arcs work, right? But then in like the process, no, our challenges were
Yeah.
completely different, and we found out very early. Like I tend to be on the pantser side of things. Emily tends to be on the plotter side of things. So when we first got together, like it seemed as though our writing lives were in no way in common, right? But the story, like the theory of writing, storycraft, is it. So like we still had to learn those things. We still were having challenges with plot. We still were having challenges with arcs, and like how do you show on the page, so all of those things we still had to learn together. And I think that's what really like connected us, because if you looked at like how we sat down to actually do the thing, it was not the same at all.
No, I showed up with like 8,000 spreadsheets and like no words written, and Rachel showed up with a draft. She was like, I don't want to revise it.
I was like, here's a draft and it's terrible and I don't know what to do about it and I'm not gonna plot. Like it's just not gonna happen.
How we fit together. I don't know.
Yeah.
Opposites attract, they say.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners, if you hear fireworks, it's currently like it's firework night in the UK, so I might have some fireworks going off in the background. So please ignore those. And what do you think is now the reality of being an emerging author? Do you think that it's becoming, because of how accessible publishing a book is, and promoting a book is, I guess, do you think it's more difficult to write, publish, and sell a book as a consequence?
I
think it's easier.
Yeah. You go ahead.
I think it's definitely easier in the sense that if you don't want to engage with the gatekeepers, you don't have to, right? Like you don't need anyone's permission to put your book in the world. So in that case, like it's as easy as it could be, right? Because there's no one you have to convince. You can write anything and you can find a way to publish it. But in a way, that's, I think, made some things harder in the sense that, like, depending on the path that you choose, it's not easy either way. And I think that people, because you have the ability to just write a book and put it up there, people have a tendency to be like, oh, well, it's going to be so easy and everyone's going to love my book and it'll be fantastic, right? And it's like, no matter what publishing path you choose, you still have to learn how to market, how to do all these things, right? You have to learn how to find the readers that are out there, and get them to read your book. And that's not an easy process. It's totally doable. Everybody can do it, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. So I think overall it's easier, but that doesn't mean it's easy. I guess it's my short answer.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the perfect kind of catchphrase really for being an author in the modern day of technology and social media. And just because it's easier to publish doesn't mean it's necessarily easier to build a business, to build a career from selling your book. And I guess for you both, was the moment of finding a critique partner kind of the beginning of trying to make sense of that? Do you like what, I guess we've not really spoken about critique partners on the channel before, so I just want to make sure that we address for our audience like the value of finding a critique partner in this kind of environment, what benefits that provides them in terms of helping to write their book, in terms of understanding publishing, or working through that together. I'm not sure, Rachel, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I'd love to start talking about this with like the pain points that, like, what were my pains? What was I experiencing? Because I think a lot of writers are unsure whether or not they need one or when to get one, and even what are they. So at the time, I had written multiple first drafts of like a couple different books, and I had no problem getting words on the page. But every time I sat down to write, I like felt an intense feeling of perfectionism. Nothing was ever right. I didn't feel like anything that I was writing was making sense. I also felt like I should be writing a specific way. Like I felt like being a pantser was setting me back because I couldn't make sense of an outline, and I felt like my books were just all over the place. Like I really felt like I knew I wanted my book to be good. I didn't know how to make it good. So I went on Twitter, and there was a Twitter post that was like, hey, do you want a critique partner? They'll help you with getting feedback. I already knew the value of feedback because from like a professional standpoint, I actually taught how to give and receive feedback in like a corporate world. So I knew like the value of feedback helps you grow personally. I know it's essential for like showing you, the blind spots that you can't see. I know it's like totally valuable, but I also knew it was like, it's a really challenging relationship. Like you have to have a lot of trust and vulnerability. I did not have any other writing friends. So I went on Twitter, I saw the post, and I posted on it, I'm writing this kind of book. Does anyone want to be my critique partner? I think Emily DM'd me first and was like, yeah, let's swap some pages. And we started swapping pages, and like immediately I could tell that I did not have the knowledge I wanted to have, but I didn't know what knowledge was going to make sense. I didn't know like where to start. I also have a super busy life, and I did at the time, and I like wasn't super motivated to do it by myself. So I was just feeling really unmoored. Finding Emily changed everything because it gave me someone to build that trust with. It gave me someone to brainstorm and bounce ideas off of. Emily also was incredible at being like identifying the pieces of my story that needed work that like I couldn't see, right? I was so in it, and she was like, I don't understand your character motivations. Like I remember that so clearly of her being like, what are your character's motivations? And not me being like, I don't know. And like not even knowing like where to start with that. So we decided that both of us were going to study craft together. And like that was even motivating because I had already bought all the craft books, but I just like didn't want to read them. I like didn't have any motivation to read them. Or I would read a line and be like, that's cool. How do you apply it? I don't know what any of this means. So we had a really great like first 6 to 9 months of just being critique partners where we read these books, we talked about them together, we like did the exercises together that are listed in the books and like swapped them so that we could look and be like, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? Like we were constantly just asking, do you see what I'm doing? Do you see what I'm doing? How can I make this more clear? How can I make this more clear? And like bouncing the ideas off, even to just process them, to understand them, to be like, oh, this is how character arcs work. Is that what you thought? No, I thought they worked like this. So it was just incredible to have kind of a buddy to learn with, and then to practice putting it like into our stories at the same time, and then swap pages again and be like, hey, I tried the backstory thing. Does it make sense? And then being like, yeah, or I think you should do it this way. So the benefit of having that person in your writing life is like learning, soundboard, brainstorming, outside eyes. Like it 100% changed everything about my writing experience. And from doing that, like I feel like I got like a writing high, right? Like I just felt so good. And we started to talk about like we learned craft, and it just clicked. Like having another person kind of work through it with us made it click, and we needed to learn more. We like had to keep learning. Without that, I don't think I would have been motivated. I don't think I would have like made sense of plot itself because I didn't care. I didn't care about it. And like I needed someone to help me figure it out, and also see like Emily's take on it, because her take on it was different than mine often, and we would have to find like the middle ground or work through like, oh, how did you interpret that? Why did you interpret it this way? So yeah, it was probably the best choice at the time that I had ever made for my writing life, and like it changed the trajectory of our whole lives, really.
Yeah. Emily, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that pretty much encapsulates, like, it's such a magical. I guess the thing that I would add is, right, I spent a while on Twitter trying to find critique partners. And I shared pages with a lot of different people, and only two of them still get pages from me, which are Rachel and my alpha reader, whose name is Jess. And so they are the two people who stuck with it. Like I had to be brave. I probably shared pages with 20, 25 different people like over those 2 years because I knew, well, part for me, I needed some validation that what I was doing was like interesting and like worth pursuing. So there was, I think that's like a super valid thing, right? We write so that with the hope that other people are going to connect with the story, and we don't know if our stories are connecting. We don't know if they're translating like what we have in our head to the page until somebody else reads it. And so that's like a super valid reason to get a critique partner. I also just really needed like a cheerleader. I was struggling to finish anything because I was like learning structure, and I was so like I'm such like a learner, so I was like I'm going to read all the craft books. Like unlike Rachel, I had read them all already, and like that didn't mean I understood them, but like I had read them all. I was like they're going to make my book great, but I couldn't get to the end. And part of that was that I just needed that accountability, the support to like keep me moving forward, and like somebody encouraging me. And I think that that can be such a really beautiful part of the relationship too, if you find someone that you just like click with on that level. But yeah, it can take some time and like perseverance to find those people.
Yeah.
I guess then, do you think that there's red flags that they should be looking out for when looking for a critique partner? Emily, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm sure there's there's so many. So the reason that we in our community, so we run a writing program and community, and in it we require people to go through a feedback training before they are eligible to participate in our like writing group and critique partnership programs. So the reason that we do that is to help people understand that like there are ways to give feedback that are more respectful, more supportive, and more actionable than other ways. And a lot of that has to do with respect. A lot of it has to do with trust. And so a lot of the red flags have to do with that. Like, is somebody overstepping your boundaries? Are you communicating well, right? Are you, when you share pages with someone and you ask them for feedback, like a specific kind of feedback, are they giving you the feedback that you asked for, or are they giving you something that you didn't ask for, right? Are they being respectful of your vision when you ask them for feedback, or are they, forcefully asserting that you should write it the way they want you to, right? And that I think sometimes when people don't know how to give feedback, they can do that on accident. And so it's a lot of, right, like feeling out that human relationship. Like, and so just as with any, like if you're going to go on a date, right? Like all the same red flags.
Yeah.
To be totally honest, right?
Yeah.
Like you're trying to get to know a person and you're being vulnerable with them by sharing your work. And so the red flags that you're looking for are red flags that they don't respect your vulnerability.
Yeah.
And Rachel, I just wonder then, is critique partner kind of the first step before book coach, or is it you get a critique partner or a book coach? Like, what's the dynamic between the two?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a book coach is a professional editor that a coaching relationship is so one-on-one, and it can serve a lot of the same purposes as a critique partner. Like really there's a lot of overlap. But like a book coach is a professional, has training, understands, and is coming from a position of like, I will help you finish and I can teach you what you need to know and I can act as your accountability partner and you're going to pay me money. Like book coaches, that's our business, right? And so like we've had tons of experience working with all sorts of different writers in not only craft, but also in like developing the process and developing the mindset. And like it is a holistic view of you're going to work with me one-on-one on a set schedule to accomplish a specific set of goals. And when our program is over, we either do another program or you've done what you've needed to do. A critique partner is usually not a professional, right? Like when Emily and I met, we were not professionals. We didn't know what we were doing. So like when you meet a critique partner, they're usually another writer. Most people tend to connect well if you're in the same like zone of learning, right? Like Emily and I were totally different writers with totally different experience levels, but we were in like the same mindset of like, we want to learn, right? Like we connected really well on how we approached learning and how we did that. But like if Emily was like a 10-time published author, we might not have connected the same way. right? So a critique partner, I think, it still is one-on-one, but it's a little different of like you're coming to this relationship for like a buddy. And a book coach is like you're coming to this relationship for professional help.
Or
And
professional trainer is how I like to
professional
think of it.
yeah, like a trainer. We've definitely used that metaphor of like you're gonna work
Personal
out,
trainer. That's what I mean.
personal trainer. You're gonna work out, you want to build a muscle, you want to build a skill, you're gonna go get a trainer to help you do that, a teacher, really. So that's what coaches do. And there's not, you asked like when is the right time to do either. There is no right time. It kind of is like, where are you at? What are you looking for? And how do you think either one of these options is going to serve you the best? And you also can have both at the same time. Like most of my clients have a critique partner and or a writing group. And so they're working with a lot of different people at once and getting a lot of different opinions and advice and help. That's really where it comes down to is what kind of help are you looking for? And are you ready for a book coach? Are you ready for a critique partner? What sounds the best or most exciting and engaging?
Yeah, and with the authors that you typically work with then as part of your community and the program that you run, at what stage are they at in their process? Are they emerging authors, or are they, they've published a book, or, at what stage are they at?
They're all over the
Any,
place.
yeah.
Yeah. So the thing with, a book coach is different, right, than an editor in the sense that when you're sending something to an editor, whether it's for developmental edits at the story level or line edits at the line level, right, you're sending usually a completed manuscript to them for them to kind of give you advice to take you to the next level. A book coach is someone who's going along with you on the journey. So in our program, and different programs are structured differently, but in ours, we meet with you every week. So we meet with you every week. We talk for an hour. We give you kind of homework assignments to learn new craft things or give us pages. And then we give you feedback on those and we start the cycle over. So it's every single week. So we start with people on every phase of the process. We've had people who have a book idea and they have no idea where to start. And like that, we're just at, square one of both their story and their learning. And we've had people come to us with published books before who want to take their next project or their finished draft to the next level. So anywhere in between. And we have people who come with half a draft. We have people who come with, draft two. The best time to hire a book coach is just when you want a professional support to take it to the next step. There's really no like right entry point for it.
Yeah, and I guess then, do they have a similar goal? Like, is it that all of these writers that you're working with have a goal of, I want to sell my book to build a career, or is it that they just want to publish their book? Like, does the goal of the author actually kind of range?
It ranges. It ranges for sure. I think our goals are the same as a coach, where like I want to teach my client, I want to teach my writer how to improve their craft skills, how to build a process that works for them, their unique brain and body and life, and how to strengthen their mindset. Like those are my goals every time I meet with a client. But from the client side, they might have a goal of like, I've never finished a draft. All I want to do is figure out how to finish a draft. For me, I'm like, well, you might not have finished a draft because you have a mindset thing. Let's talk about that. Or maybe you're just struggling to make craft work for you. Let's talk about that. Then we have other clients that are like, I want to get this draft ready for querying. Cool. I am going to self-publish this book in 6 months. I need help with the revision. So like their goals are, we also work with our clients to come up with accomplishable goals that we can do within our program, right? Because sometimes a client comes to us that is like, I want to publish this book and I want to sell 10,000 copies. And we're like, okay, I have 6 months. What can we do to get you as close as possible to that 6 months? So then we work on our side to come up with something that's really specific and like reasonable and accomplishable, within the time frame that we're going to work together to get them as close as possible, to their big goals.
Yeah, great stuff. And we've kind of touched on the services that the areas in which you guys are focusing on, the mindset, the process. And I kind of want to dig into that a little bit more, because one of the things that I really like about the fact, what I like about the work that you guys are doing is that you focus really on the individual, and you have these almost personality types that you kind of that you talk about, and like the plotter and what was it? I can't remember what the other one was.
Pantser. Yeah, there's like
I bet
it's
it's
like
of your pants.
yeah, if this is new to anybody, there's like we think it's a spectrum. Some people treat it as labels. I don't think they are. I don't think it's a binary. It's a spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, you have a plotter who's going to plan everything like down to the nth degree before they want to write or as they're writing. And then on the other side, you have a pantser who flies by the seat of their pants. That's how you got the name. And they plan nothing and just write and see what happens. But it's usually a spectrum. Like you fall somewhere within those two things, and it can also shift depending on where you are in your learning journey, or like what tactic you're approaching for your latest project, or like
He's laughing at me because I pantsed the last act of my last draft. Which is not really true because it was plotted, but I didn't do scene outlines. But yeah, the point is like you on that spectrum, right? Depending on wherever you are at any given point in time, you can use the tools at your disposal differently, right? So when we teach craft tools like what's a character arc or what's show don't tell or what's a scene outline, right? We teach those tools with the expectation that the way that a person uses it is going to be, and when they use it in their process is going to be individual to them. Because I think far too often in the sort of book teaching industry world, right, we talk as if like the tools that we're teaching or the way that we work is the way to do it. And that I think is at a disservice to writers, because you're never going to finish books that you love if you don't figure out how to use the craft tools that you like, that work for you, in a process that works for you. Like if you don't figure that out first, no books are going to get written. It's just the truth of it. And so that's why we individualize everything that we do.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really sensible, in the world of, more kind of exposure and knowledge around things like, neurodiversity, about, the different ways people's brains process information and interact and engage with the world around them. It just makes sense that, just a cookie cutter approach just won't work, and people have different responsibilities as well and day-to-day realities, and so understanding and kind of, I guess, integrating that into their writing process is going to be hugely impactful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's where, so for me, like I always felt like craft didn't make sense to me because the way people were telling me to use craft, I just couldn't do it, or like it would just drain all of the excitement from it. And then I found out I'm neurodivergent, and then I was like, oh, I don't think this way, right? Like, so we went through this whole journey of like there has to be a way for this to be applied, but each person can choose like what makes sense to them. So the theory, what I was saying earlier, is like the theory of character arcs remain the same, but like I don't plot them. I just kind of I like understand how they work. So as I'm writing, I'm thinking, okay, I need my character to undergo like a massive failure right now. What's it going to be? But I don't have that plotted because it's boring AF, right? Like, so I think just like we spent so much time in the early part of our business thinking about different brains work differently, and there is no one right way. Even the craft that we teach, we're like we fully understand that like this might not work for somebody, go find your own thing, and that's totally okay. Because everybody works differently. Everybody's brains are differently. And also too, once I got diagnosed with ADHD, I think it gave me a lot of awareness of like, well, of course I don't find this as stimulating as just writing. Cool. That answers a lot of questions about me. And now I can like really follow the lead of my brain when I can feel it. I can feel my brain being like, you're not getting stimulation. This isn't working. And then I'll try to figure something else out and work that into my process.
Yeah.
And so do you think, sorry, Emily, but I just wondered, like, do you think it's important for authors to understand what kind of writing personality, I guess they are? Or is it, I don't know, where do they start in kind of figuring all of this out, I guess?
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you
It's
take that.
yeah, I think a lot of it is this is multi-layered because there's a lot of trial and error. And I also think there's a lot of ingrained expectations that we put on ourselves, and they usually show up in the form of should. Like, I used to think I should be a plotter. I should outline. And that gave me a lot of shame at the beginning. And so, like, I wanted so badly to be a plotter because I thought that it would fix my books and like fix me as a writer. And I had to do a lot of work to not think like that anymore. Like, I had to peel back those layers. I had to peel back, like, what are the expectations I'm putting on myself before I ever got to a place where I was okay with experimenting. So I think like a really important place to start to figure out, bring awareness to your own process is to examine what are you expecting of yourself and where is that not working? Because it was not working for me. It really was not. And all the shame just made me feel terrible about it. And like at the beginning, I've talked to Emily about this before, like I had a lot of comparison to Emily of like, I want to be like you, but I don't know how. And we had to like figure out, well, you don't have to. You don't have to be. We don't have to be like each other. But it's the mindset was important. And then also, I started just treating everything like an experiment. I'm going to try this thing. If it doesn't work for me, cool. I'll move on. I'll try something different. And if that doesn't work for me, great. And like I became really curious about myself and about the process. And I listened to my own intuition because I think you can feel like this isn't working. And then you just don't beat a dead horse about it. You just like, okay, we'll pause. We'll try something else.
A lot of it comes down to self-awareness. I think it just like paying attention to what the voices in your head are saying, and if they're your gut instinct or if they're, some kind of external expectation that you've sort of that has been ingrained in you, and starting to pick apart. And it takes time and it takes intention to start to pick apart like which voices are yours and which voices aren't, and which ones you actually value and which ones are just because you're afraid, right? And starting to tease that stuff apart, because then you can start to really look at, okay, what feels good, because that is, I think, the number one sort of indicator that you're headed in the right direction with process. And it's probably not useful to be like, I'm a plotter or I'm a pantser, right? At that stage of the process, like you might not know because of the way that, perfectionism likes to show up as I'm a plotter. Like it really, really does. Even for me, right? Because then I use it as an excuse why I can't explore. And so like setting those aside and just being like, okay, what do I feel like doing? What feels right? What is exciting? What is fun? What keeps me moving forward? Like those are where your answers lie.
And Emily, I just wonder, as part of the work that you both do, I guess, how do you help authors to develop that writing process that works for them? What are the steps that you kind of take them through?
Yeah. So we actually have so in our program, our Tenacious Writing program, which is a lifetime access program that writers can buy into and then just be a part of forever. We have a course on how to build a sustainable writing routine, which Rachel can tell you more about because she built it. And then when we're working with our one-on-one clients, it's a similar process, but we're checking in about that every week, right? So if we're working with a brand new writer who doesn't know, doesn't have a process yet, we play, right? And so every week, like part of their assignment is to explore and play with new approaches to how to use the craft that we're teaching them or how to show up to the page. And so a lot of it is that communication, that week to week experimentation. And then same, if we have a really jaded author coming in who's got several books behind them, but writing's no longer fun, right? We're going to work to be like, okay, well, what's fun? Like, let's make that part of our goal, part of our focus from week to week. Rachel, you want to talk about your course?
Yeah. So I think like in the course itself, the first thing we start with is mindset and like, what are the expectations that you hold for yourself? And we talk a lot about hustle culture which is the basic idea that your worth is tied to how much you work and how much you produce. And it is pervasive in Western culture, and it's like incredibly damaging to creativity, and it messes so much up. So we explore like beliefs about hustle culture and beliefs about productivity and beliefs about, you know, what shoulds are coming to your mind and how often do you think you should be able to create and how much. And we start with that and we ask, like, why do you think those are true? Where is this coming from? Because we're aiming towards like they're not true, and like how do we shift away from them, and how do we rebuild our own ideas about how we create, what are the pressures of creating, and what does creativity look like. So for sure in my one-on-one calls, I'm talking a lot about hustle culture. I'm talking a lot about like, you know, what do you expect of yourself? Why? Who taught you that? Where did it come from? Because it's ingrained. It absolutely is. And it's usually ingrained pretty innocuously. Like no one meant to teach you that your worth was tied to your word count, but like that's how capitalism works, right? Like that's how this all works. So we examine that. And once we're getting to a place of like thinking, oh, okay, maybe I can create in whatever way is pleasing to me, then we play with, we experiment with like the variables of our life. I think there are some things about life that we cannot change, such as like Emily and I are both parents. We're business owners. We have obligations. We have responsibilities. Like those things are not going to change, you know? Like I can't just decide one day, I have unlimited time and I don't have to take care of my daughter, right? Like there are, I call them practical disruptors. So like there are practical things that just are part of our life. But then there are like the mindset and the belief disruptors that we have to work through and then experiment with how to fit in the gaps of time that we have. So then we experiment with like any type of variable in your daily life. Like for me, a big change was deciding that like I could just write from my bed and not at my desk. And like, whoa, that was way more comfortable. And I was able to create a lot more. And then we talk about like, okay, well, you only have 10 minutes. Can you write in 10 minutes? You know, like, what's that look like with you? So we play with like the variable of how long do you give yourself to write? What does that look like? We play with the time of day. Do you like to write in the morning? Do you like to write at night? I like to write at night. I do more at nighttime and I feel better about it. So we have people practice different times a day. We have people practice like, do you like listening to music? Do you not like listening to music? Do you like to have a candle on? Do you not? Like it literally could be anything. But you just try it and you're like, does this affect me? Does it not? Or does it, you know, did that work? Did it not? And eventually over time, you start to learn like, I actually work really well at night. I work the best from my bed and I work better if I don't have my contacts in. Cool. And then like you can remove a lot of barriers that you never even realized were interrupting your process. And you can start to have a lot more fun with it. So we're also asking that same question of how could you make this fun? If this could be fun for you, what would that be like? And like for some people, that's to go out to the coffee shop. Cool. Go to a coffee shop, order a coffee, go have fun. Some of our writers really like to write in the library because it's quiet, they're surrounded by books. And so like you're just asking, what do I want to do? How can I make this fun? And then you're trying it out.
Yeah. And I think I love this emphasis on play, you know.
Yeah.
Like as adults, you kind of forget to try things and to experiment and to, you know, and I think having someone to just remind you, you know, just give it a go. Like what's it gonna hurt? You know, I think that's a really useful intervention to have someone else to be like, go do it, like why not, give it a go. And when it comes to craft, we are running out of time, so we're gonna have to get through this last little bit. But Emily, would you have any kind of key areas that authors tend to struggle on that are a key emphasis in your work around craft?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to, right, those really heavy basics around what does your character want? Why do they want it? Right? Where did those wants come from in their past? And then how do you take that character and the journey that you want to put them through into the structure of a story? And I think what craft really is just a set of reader expectations. And so a lot of it comes down to writers just haven't thought about what is it that readers of my kind of story are going to expect, and then looking for the craft resources that are going to support them, or that might support them, right, in the sort of delivering the vision that they have for their story and how they want it to impact people. So I think a lot of times writers are tempted to go into the show don't tell line level stuff to make their story sound really good, and oftentimes the biggest things that we need to work on are actually at that deep foundational level. Just because you have consumed stories your entire life does not mean you know how to structure them. Surprise, surprise to every writer ever who's decided to try to write a book. And so sort of backing up to look at what are those big foundational things for whatever it is that you're trying to write, those big expectations that people have, can be really helpful.
Yeah, and actually, the reader expectation part of it harkens back to the conversation that we had about marketing. Is actually that in itself can be a really important piece in your, not only the writing piece but also in the marketing piece. How do you promote it? You need to understand what it is that readers are wanting to get out of your book, and so what beats are they expecting to see and to experience. And so I think that piece is really important and actually can't be underemphasized enough, I don't think. So as I said, we are running out of time, and I would have wanted to talk a little bit more about craft and process with you guys, but I think actually we've got quite a lot there from talking about critique partners and seeking the right kind of help for what it is that you're looking to do, looking at the mindset and those beginning stages, I guess, of trying to figure out what's a good writing lifestyle for you as an independent writer. But before we finish, it would be great to get from each of you, and maybe something that we've not touched on perhaps, but a piece of advice that you would like to leave our listeners with. Rachel, did you want to give it a go?
Yes. So I think this kind of wraps up what we were talking about earlier, where there's all this pressure and all this expectation to write a certain way or meet expectations or fulfill a need or produce enough to increase your value, whatever. I think approaching this entire process with the curious mindset, with the attitude of I just want to play and have fun. I think we end up accomplishing way more when we like what we're doing. So figuring out how to make sure that you like what you're doing is really important. But along those same lines, you got to let go of the stress. We joke about this a lot, Emily and I too. There are no emergencies in publishing, but so much of this feels very high stakes in the moment of if I don't get this character right, I'm a failure. And it just feels so activating in your nervous system, but it's not. It's really not. I think everybody just can take a deep breath. I think everybody can let go of some of those pressures and come back to that playful attitude, that curious attitude of if I just stopped putting so much pressure on myself, what would this be like? That's my advice.
Great stuff. And Emily?
Yeah, so I think mine kind of ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning with critique partners is you don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times writers think that they can't get support until they have a completed draft, right? That until the story is right or the scenes are right, that you can't have other people's eyes on it, or you can't invite somebody else into your space, right? Into your creative sort of sphere. And that's just not true, right? We talked about critique partners. There's all kinds of labels, beta readers, alpha readers, everything, right? A partnership with another writer can look any way you want it to. So if you just if you are yearning for someone else to be brought into your journey with you, just think intentionally about what is it that you want. Sometimes I have readers who I just want them to give me positive feedback while I'm working on a draft because I need that momentum, right? And so there's no right or wrong answer for what it is that you are looking for, and you can always go searching for those people. You shouldn't have to do this alone if you're not enjoying doing it alone.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So essentially, you're not alone. Find the joy in writing, and just try new things, test things out, see what fits. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And for our listeners, if you would like to find out more about the Tenacious Writing program or even the podcast, which will provide all the that's not a word, links down in the podcast description. And if you would like to hear more about skills and knowledge to help you build a writing career, I really can't get my words out today, I don't know why, then make sure to subscribe to the Book Tribe podcast, where we have more subject matter experts like Emily and Rachel. But yeah, thank you guys, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much. I think the audience has taken away quite a lot from our conversation.
Thank you so much,
This is
Erica.
wonderful.